Liebe Hörerinnen und Hörer, bevor wir mit der heutigen Folge starten, haben wir eine Bitte an euch. Wir haben bald unsere 100. Folge, nach der wir ein bisschen überlegen werden, wie wir mit dem Podcast weitermachen wollen. Und deswegen ist euer Feedback gefragt. Schreibt einfach an info@nerdsoflaw.com, wovon ihr gern mehr hören würdet, weniger, was ihr gern anders haben möchtet und generell eure Wünsche an uns und an den Nerds of Law Podcast für die nächsten 100 Folgen oder mehr.
Willkommen beim Nerds of Law Podcast. Die Nerds of Law, das sind Katharina Bissett und Michael Lanzinger. Wir präsentieren euch Neuigkeiten zu Recht und Technik, spannende Interviews sowie Tipps und Tricks generell zur geekigen Seite des Rechts. Denn vergesst nie, Law is the ultimate science.
Nerds of Law, Episode 98, All Inclusive, with Rita Isiba. Dear listeners, welcome to a new episode of the Nerds of Law podcast. Today we have another exciting guest with us. We invited Rita Isiba, who I've known for a couple of years now. I think more or less by accident I pitched a talk in one of her Women Go International programs, if I remember correctly, and we just clicked, been friends ever since. And because she does so many awesome things, we wanted to invite her here to the podcast. But Rita, please introduce yourself and tell our audience more about you and your background.
Thank you so much for inviting me, first and foremost. I'm a great fan of all the things that you do, of you and Michael, or Michael, I should say. I'm not even sure whether I
Thanks.
should.
No, both is working.
You said you're a fan. You can call him anything now.
Yeah,
Mike.
So. Mike.
No,
Mike is
sincerely,
okay. Mikey, it's no problem. Like the turtle one. So Mikey is fine.
But thanks ever so much for inviting me. And it's interesting that you mentioned we met at the Women Go International event. I immediately fell in love with your presence, Katharina. You have this great combination of being incredibly smart, curious, open-minded, and also very witty. And I think a lot of people who know you agree. We gravitate towards you like a fly on honey.
That is very sweet of you.
No,
yeah, don't
absolutely.
flatter her too much. It will go up in her head. So.
But Michael, I know you agree. Otherwise, you both wouldn't have been partners for such a long time.
Yeah, but he wouldn't admit it, I think.
If you could say something about me too, but since we know us from the birthday parties of Katharina, it's like just say he's a good eater or something like that. It's
Also, I'm also really delighted that Michael is here to interview me as well, because the first time I spoke with you at a birthday party of Katharina's, I was really at awe of your personality, which doesn't really match with your occupation, if I may say, because
He's way too nice
that
for a criminal attorney. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think also it's because, criminal attorneys tend to be stereotyped by the media. And so you always have this kind of picture of what type of attorney you are. But to be fully honest, you just ended up being like one of the sweetest, empathetic persons who I spoke with on that birthday. So I'm really, really delighted to have you as a team invite me to Nerds of Law. And let me just tell you a little bit about myself.
Yes, because now we told everyone how awesome you are. Now you need to bring that one home as well. And Michael is, I think, passed out under the table now.
I will try. So I'm an engagement specialist, and I have a business that cooperates with organizations to address the specific engagement needs of diverse groups. So in a nutshell, I'm a expert in business and people engagement. And in that role, I wear 3 hats. One, meditating between experts and the audience as a panel moderator. 2, interacting with teams as a facilitator. And 3, I strengthen the soft skills of adults as a corporate trainer. So in a nutshell, my clients hire me to create an atmosphere or a safe space where people like a live audience, employees or working groups are encouraged to be interested and involved in the work of their organization. So what made me who I am and why do I do what I do? It all started with my parents, Timothy and Lola. They both emigrated from Nigeria to Austria in the 1970s. My father was a skilled auto mechanic and worked for Opel in Vienna, and my mother is a trained goldsmith. And I was born in 1980 in Vienna's AKH as the first of 4 children, and I moved to London after completing the Handelsschule at 16. My parents had a substantial influence on me. Take, for example, my father, who taught me from a very young age that my network is my net worth. Many people probably don't realize that the playground or kiddie birthday parties are a great environment to train kids to get along, play together, and build relationships. And my mother taught me always to treat people respectfully. And by this, she means that you should always create the feeling of us. So, however, actually, I don't want anyone to misconstrue me, because, you know, it's not always easy to treat people respectfully. So there's an other side on the coin. My mother always taught me to treat people respectfully, and by this she means that you should always create the feeling of us. But it's not always easy to treat people like how you want to be treated, because funny enough, there are a lot of people out there who tend to treat you poorly. So in that case, it is in your best interest to handle them either by an eye for an eye, so basically mirror their behavior, or if you are confident to handle conflict, then you can always agree to disagree. But before you get to that stage,
which is a very British thing to say. You see,
it probably is. It probably is. But you know, maybe it's got the influence of, because since my parents are Nigerians, the Nigerians were they were colonized by the Brits. So I think many of the morals or values have similarities. Mm-hmm. It's not a right or wrong. It's just I'm just sharing with you the impact and the influence my parents had on me, and this kind of turned out very useful for me later on in life. So as I mentioned, with 16 I moved to the UK. I pursued my higher education in the UK and went on to work in the capacity of business administration for different departments and industries across Europe and Africa. And within the role as a business administrator, I transferred and expanded my know-how in private equity, insurance, management consultancies, and eventually the United Nations. So the reason why I'm mentioning this to you is because I just wanted to give you a little bit of an insight about my multicultural upbringing, my qualifications, the international work experience, and the fact that I encountered people from a very young age who are very different, from different backgrounds. And this experience brought to me a really big revelation. So this revelation for me is the realization that whether you are in our private life or at work, emotional intelligence and teamwork are crucial for personal and professional success. So I draw on my research, observations, experience to lecture precisely this topic, empathy and teamwork, at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna.
Yeah, I totally wanted to know more about this because you told me about this rather new master's program there, which is kind of half lawyery, half artsy, which doesn't seem like a very natural thing to go together. So yes, please tell us what you do at the uni and what you teach to the students there.
Yeah. So I lecture on team building and empowerment at the master program of Applied Human Rights at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna. And what I do is to guide students to explore the impact of communication style on its effectiveness, and to help them recognize and reflect on their cognitive bias. I prepare them for the challenge of facing difficult conversations and help them improve their abilities to learn from relational experiences. So my sole purpose as a lecturer is to provide students with the right skills, soft skills, to communicate effectively, handle conflicts, build and nurture relationships.
You gave me a very, very good hook to something I wanted to get into later on. You said cognitive bias, and you post about that a lot on LinkedIn. And I've not often put myself into very heated discussions on social media, obviously because of the whole lawyer background. But you see a lot, I mean, even on professional platforms like LinkedIn, I mean, on Twitter you go to moan on a nicest level. You see people fighting over things, having discussions about gender equality, about inclusive language, which was a big thing or is a big thing again and again. And I often struggle to know even what to say, how not to offend anyone. And it gets so far that I feel sometimes, oh my God, I can't say something. For example, I came across a comic that I thought was funny and I wanted to share it. I was like, I don't know, is that offensive? Is that like, am I betraying my whole gender with this? And sometimes this stresses me out so much, I'd rather not say anything than being scared of offending someone. And it's really, so I think that's a struggle that I have and that I've talked to you about. And I know towards you, I can just say something and you'll tell me if I'm wrong or if I misunderstood something. But I know I can be clumsy and then can run my mouth, and that's why Michael is our gender management specialist, and he's the resident feminist, because I keep forgetting to gender things in the German language. But I really don't want to offend anyone. So how do I even start? I mean, how do I start in perceiving or judging what I want to say against, could I be offensive towards someone? Or yeah.
Do you know what? I feel your pain. Even though I'm a black woman, I tend to also have to mince my words to make sure that I don't offend others. I'd like to take it from the perspective of my work experience. Mm-hmm. So, in the past, I was asked by some organizations to provide diversity training. But after a few classes, I came to realize that I don't really believe in the concept of providing diversity classes. Now, so what I'm saying now is very controversial.
Oh, go ahead.
And so allow me to explain why. So I know there's a lot of literature that emphasizes that diversity is a business case. I do not dispute this, but in my experience, I lean more towards an inclusive culture rather than facilitating a diverse culture, because I believe an inclusive culture means that everyone has a sense of belonging. As a black woman, I know that some people don't either have a fear or feel a level of discomfort when perhaps I'm in a room or I'm sat in a group, because they're not sure really how to approach me. And most of the times, the reason why they're not sure on how to approach me is because either they've been to a diversity course where they have learned the many pitfalls that or mining fields they are, of a conversation with someone who happens to be a woman or someone who happens to be black can go wrong.
So they probably are afraid to make a joke about your butt or something.
They're afraid to make a joke. They don't know how to. They're unsure in how to refer to me. Can you say? Bist du als schwarze Frau, als farbige Frau, als Negerin? They're not really sure in how to perhaps categorize me, because there are so many different terms that have been considered as offensive. It's really, really tough because every person has their own unique experiences. And so this is the reason why I believe this diversity training only creates people to walk on eggshells around either women or minorities. And this choosing words carefully eventually turns people off. And then you are outcasted then, really, or you're being penalized for being other.
Well, from my experience, I can just advise everyone listening just to approach you because you're awesome.
Thank you very much. But the thing is that you know me, and you're also very confident and curious. Not everyone has these characterisms, and I don't expect that from anyone, right? But I've come to realize that. Well, I've witnessed that many anti-discrimination courses, they focus on improving awareness for those with less exposure to the subject matter, which is not a bad thing, but at the same time, it can penalize exactly those people who are trying to advocate for respect. Somewhere I must have also read that there's actually evidence-based research that diversity training only lasts, so the effects of diversity training only lasts for about 1 or 2 days, and then people revert back to their normal behaviors. Okay. It kind of makes sense anyway, because usually the way you act is, and your beliefs are usually ingrained from childhood. Your world views and how you socialize with people, and the media you consume, and even the way your brain functions influence how you think of yourself and how you interact with the world. And if you live in Austria, for example, where I believe 90% of the population is homogeneous, then it will be difficult for you to interact with people who don't fall within this 90%. So, for example, the fact that you and Michael know me is a rarity, because black people in Austria account for less than 1%.
Okay. So,
because you have the ability to interact with me, you can ask me the right questions. You know how far you can go with certain jokes and how you can refer to me without being offended. Well, not everyone can. Not
usually,
everyone has.
It's Rita. Usually, I mean.
Usually, but you know what I mean, right?
Yes.
You know what I mean.
Yes.
If you want to speak about me in third person and say, ja, Rita is die Dunkelhäutige. For me, that's not offensive, but do you know what? For some people, it may be. And this is the reason why this whole diversity thing can be really, really confusing for a lot of people. And I strongly advocate a culture of giving people a sense of belonging. And this translates back to what I actually do.
But I would like to just to interject quickly here in case our listeners don't really know the difference. And the more you talk about it, the more I'm aware of the linguistic difference, where diversity talks about how we're different and inclusion talks about how we're together, how we're included. So from a linguistic standpoint, one sounds more dividing than the other. But I'm not sure if everyone, both terms are being thrown around a lot. Could you just maybe quickly go into what inclusion and diversity even is?
Mm-hmm. Well, diversity just simply means having people of different backgrounds, be it gender, be it sexual orientation, religion, age, even language, as you mentioned. And inclusion solely means unity, bringing people from all different backgrounds together, irrespective of their differences, actually quite in the contrary, to bridge the differences and focus on the commonalities. That's the difference between diversity and inclusion.
So there was an example I gave you where I wasn't aware that when I was younger, I was offending people, asking them where they were from. I did it because I love different cultures and I'm always curious about what people do and what background they have, but obviously it can be offensive to someone who doesn't look like the masses, the 90%, for example, in Austria, to just assume they're not born or raised in Austria, like you were, for example. So would then a different approach be more like, hey, how was your upbringing like? Do you live in Vienna? And then you talk about, okay, what you do now to live here, and then say, okay, what stuff you like here and where you grew up. Because you can ask me where I grew up. I did not grow up in Vienna. So you can, is that some way you can approach it without being, being offensive, or just trying, it's hard for me trying to find out more about a person and what makes them tick without even touching on their differences.
Mm-hmm. Look, this is again one of the typical frequently asked questions in diversity courses as well. And to be fully honest, there is no right and wrong answer. You just have to feel the situation, right? So if you, for example, we don't know each other and we have a conversation, right? Mm-hmm. And following our conversation, you then are curious to know about my background. Then there's a way of asking it, right?
Like, what's your background, for example? Then you can always say it's personal,
professional. It depends exactly what you want to know. Because if I happen to speak to you now in German, and you're asking me where I come from, then the best thing actually is to ask where my parents come from.
Yeah, because you've got a very Viennese accent talking German.
Ja, aber ich schaue nicht wie eine typische Wienerin aus, ja.
Aber das macht's noch cooler.
Und weil ich nicht wie eine typische Wienerin ausschaue, fragt man mich auch oft, von wo ich ursprünglich herkomme. Und für mich ist das jetzt nicht eine Frage, wo ich jetzt beleidigt werde, sondern ganz im Gegenteil. Ich sage denen tatsächlich, von wo ich herkomme, und nütze auch die Gelegenheit, Fragen zu beantworten, die du normalerweise nicht vielleicht vom Internet holen können. Ich meine, mittlerweile kann man ja alles recherchieren.
Ja, aber es ist Krebs dann meistens. So.
You fall into a rabbit hole.
Ja.
Aber für mich, ich persönlich bin dann nicht beleidigt. Es gibt aber Leute, die es dann tatsächlich sind, weil sie fühlen sich als Österreicherinnen und dementsprechend möchten sie auch so behandelt werden. Und wenn man einen fragt, von wo kommst du her, dann vermittelt man das Gefühl, dass man nicht dazugehört, dass man nicht Österreicherin ist. Und das ist leider bei manchen Leuten so. Und diese Personen, ich kann mich nicht für denen rechtfertigen, weil ich es selber nicht nachvollziehen kann, warum das ein Problem ist, wenn jemand mich fragt, von wo ich herkomme. Weil ich letztendlich stolz bin, ich bin stolz mit meiner multikulturellen Hintergrund. Also ich finde es toll, dass ich eine schwarze Europäerin bin mit afrikanischen Wurzeln, weil ich weiß, dass es nicht viele von mir hier gibt. Und
deswegen finde ich die Frage eigentlich mehr aus Neugier, aus wow, du bist exotisch, du bist interessant, du bist nicht wie alle anderen, das finde ich spannend. Aber gleichzeitig hast du im Intro uns ja auch gezeigt, dass selbst du nicht ganz gefeit bist vor Prejudices. Wenn der Michael als weißer Mann du Vorurteile, das wie du dir einen Strafverteidiger vorstellst.
Richtig.
Wo sogar armer Michael jetzt diskriminiert wurde.
In einer Art und Weise schon.
Er fühlt sich nicht angegriffen, aber er weiß, wie das ist.
Er
hat da kein Problem. Das ist kein Problem.
Aber kippt das? Ich meine, ich wollte jetzt nämlich gerade sagen, über Strafverteidiger kann man ja Witze machen. Und oft ist es ja auch so, dieses Gefühl, über Männer kann man ja Witze machen. Und eine liebe Bekannte hat mich letztens darauf angesprochen, dass ihr Teenage-Sohn erzählt hat, wie hart der Umgangston gegenüber Männern, gegenüber jugendlichen Männern im Internet ist, dass Frauen, Mädels sehr schlecht über sie reden und das als absolut okay angesehen wird. Ist das sozusagen irgendwie eine Anti-Reaktion? Weil denk drüber nach, so Kommentare wie, ja, alle Männer sind Mistkerle oder so, bla bla bla. You could get away with that online.
Yes, you can.
You shouldn't be able to, but...
You shouldn't be able to, yes you can, and you will for a long time until there is a sense of balance on gender roles. For a very long period of time, women were seen as second-class citizens, and this feeling was evident on many structures. So be it in policy levels, be it in education, be it on social etiquette. For a very long time, women were demonized for being the weaker sex, so to speak. And if we just think about women who happen to be blonde, if we think about women who happen to have no children, if we think about women who decide not to marry and live on their own and solely dedicate their lives to their career, quite often these type of women were marginalized. And I think now we've reached a point where there is more and more women and also men and other genders feeling empowered to stand up for themselves, and usually this includes the ugly part of it, which is to marginalize exactly those who have oppressed certain marginalized groups for a very long time.
Okay.
This is how I see it. I wouldn't say it's fair, but we still live in a man's world, and so I would say that men will still have the ability to get over perhaps a sexist joke towards them than a woman can.
I'd probably feel flattered. No, that was mean.
Maybe. But if you're talking about toxic masculinity, well, I can't even say the word. Masculinity, that's a whole different subject, because, you know, that flows into patriarchy, and it's a whole different podcast.
I'd like to talk a bit more about teams, because you said in your intro that you work with teams, and there, you know, again and again you see articles and people posting about the advantages of diverse teams and the input, and also obviously the advantages of having more women in like highest level leadership positions. So what are your practical tips or advantages on how you can get a diverse team? I mean, if you're in a country, like you said, it's 90% boring, probably.
No, not boring.
How do you even get a diverse team together and how do you deal with it? What are the advantages of it, really? I mean, it's the logical point of me is like, yes, of course it's fair, it's different, but you've got probably more sophisticated opinion on that.
I sure hope so. You put the bar up high now. You know, we all know that teamwork is great. We all know that diverse teams are usually efficient, and high performance teams create healthy competition, innovate faster, bring on profits. The list is long of having a group of people come together as a powerful force. But there are many things that can also go wrong in a team, and it all boils down to the level of communication and engagement. Take, for example, negative group dynamics. So being trapped in a toxic working environment, for example, or office politics, which cultivates mistrust. These are elements of negative group dynamics. Most of us have more or less experienced drama at work, which are usually orchestrated by overbearing or domineering colleagues. And we all know someone who is dominant in every group discussion, or those who cannot accept feedback in the area of expertise. And then there's also people who tend to micromanage, or even worse, those who pull
We've
others
talked
into...
about it, it's not the problem, okay?
You say
What,
that
micromanage?
now. I never micromanage Michael, ever.
Well, micromanagement
Micromanage me and suffer the consequences. Sorry.
Otherwise you'd never get anything done. No.
No. There's a difference between... Please.
That's not fair, but probably true.
There's a difference between micromanagement and pointing people into the right direction to get things done. Micromanagement means that there is no element of trust for others to execute what they are hired to do. And
So Katharina is my PowerPointer.
so to speak.
And your
She's
laser
rather
pointer. I wish
that
you
was
were
a dead joke.
No.
That was a dead joke. I'm sorry.
Now, if only you were a cat.
I'm not a dead, but
No, I think the problem is I'm the laser pointer, but you're a dog.
that's probably true. Yeah. It's.
I'm so glad we already scheduled therapy in a couple of weeks.
Are you guys doing group therapy?
Well, it's called coaching.
Well, that's the reason why you both can have a banter without one person getting their knickers in a twist. What I mean by that is for one another to be offended. And clearly you all know your quirks, and you tolerate your quirks and make the best out of it, well, that's the beauty of having an efficient team. But unfortunately, not everyone has this privilege. So
I think you make us better than we are currently, but
Yeah.
yes, we're working on it.
Yeah, but I just from a practical standpoint, isn't a team that's homogeneous and agrees all the time more efficient because they don't need to fight about anything?
temporary there are, but long term it's detrimental for the organization or the project that you're working on, because the problem is that you can end up in this phenomenon called groupthink. And there's a lot of classical examples of groupthink. Perhaps you're aware of that film, The 12 Juries, in which, are you aware of that film? It's in black and white, and I highly recommend it.
Die 12 Geschworenen, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Die 12 Geschworenen, the 12 juries.
Have you never seen it, Michael? It's one of those classical jury. As a criminal attorney, you disappoint here, Michael.
I'm actually surprised that both of you haven't seen this film. But
no, I have.
Okay,
but
fair enough.
Yeah. So I'm working the whole day as a lawyer, and then in the evening I should watch like lawyer movies and lawyer TV series.
Yeah, you're right.
It's like a doctor. So, well, you're a doctor, so you have watched Emergency Room, Doctor House, House MD. Grey's Anatomy.
No.
It doesn't add up.
I understand you completely. It's just to mention that this film was made, I think, in the 40s or 50s even. It's
anyway,
in black
it's
and
cool.
white.
Okay.
It's really old.
That's interesting, actually.
You could have seen it before you became an attorney, when you were young.
Yeah, that
in the
was
70s.
my whole point. But fair enough, you haven't seen it, but you know the concept of groupthink, right?
Yep.
Okay, that's the most important thing, and I hope all the listeners know what the concept of groupthink is about as well, rather than me having to go into the theory of things. But what I'm just trying to say is that going back to what you mentioned earlier about teams, what makes a great team, usually you have to make sure that you have the right dynamics within a group, and dysfunctional behaviors within a team can hamper great or positive group dynamics. And it can be catastrophic if leaders or senior management ignore these dysfunctional behaviors or cannot handle these people, causing a toxic atmosphere. This happens as well.
So what's the thing when you go into a team to help them communicate? Is there something where you see go wrong most often, and where you're always like, oh God, not that again? Why do people keep doing this?
Well, the solutions to turning, a great dynamic in a team is usually for the managers of this team or of this group to act as facilitators in order to engage discussions, provide coaching and mentoring for the team and its members. And also, when it comes to choosing the members of the team, you need to also make sure that the skills are complementary to the task, and that they can all productively work together, even if they will never end up being friends, that they also have an understanding about each other's roles and tasks, also that they, can provide constructive feedback to one another or have a friendly banter, and also offer support to one another when in need. There's this saying, this human rights saying, leave no one behind. I don't expect this from every team, but usually team building and other social events kind of train people not to leave anyone behind. So for me, professionals who demonstrate the soft skills of teamwork, they tend to either empathize better with others, they establish more valuable relationships. Quite often they're able to manage conflict and difficult conversations. And I also believe they have the ability to influence others or lead or work as part of a team that strives towards, their positive outcome or goals. I hope I'm not speaking too academically here, because perhaps but this is my belief in how to ensure an efficient team group.
It absolutely makes sense. And for those of our listeners who, like, in their firm, in their team, want to really get better, inform themselves more, where do they start? Are there any good, apart from obviously book you for a course and read up on your LinkedIn posts, is there anything where you could say, oh, those books or resources are a good place to start on your inclusion journey, bringing people together and stuff?
I love the concept of keeping it simple. It's just a matter of exploring together what people of all backgrounds tend to discuss, debate, celebrate, and agonize about. So to think about what everyone has in common rather than the differences. And we all can train ourselves to keep an open mind by keeping curious, by moving around in diverse circles, and also reflecting on our unconscious bias. It's very easy to get to know people in social events involving sports, food, or entertainment. So rather than directing people to certain books or other literatures, I believe it's most important just to simply ask yourself whether what you're doing in order to be open for diversity, or be open for meeting and engaging with people from all different backgrounds. My message is always that diversity, equality, and inclusion has always been about unity. It's really about the best out of all people. The only way to truly get the best from everyone is through unity. Individuals tend to perform better when they have a real sense of belonging in a group or in a community. And I believe this individuality strengthens teams. Everyone who understands this bands together to succeed.
Well, I think there is really, well, it could be a more perfect wrap up. I'm just wondering if our resident Genderbeauftragte Michael, if he's got that completely dumbstruck still because you said one nice thing in the beginning to him, or
he hasn't said much. Michael, are you there?
Yes, actually, but a bit dumbstruck, yeah, from the beginning, actually. And
are you serious?
Oh, you made him shy.
No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking.
You managed to shut
but
him up.
When I'm not saying that much, that means that I'm very deep into listening, because what you said with unity and also this inclusive versus diversity, it's very, very, very interesting, because it's really affecting, I think, everyone's daily life, and it's very interesting to have the sort of diversity and the inclusion. It was quite interesting.
Okay, that's a good thing.
I have to get to wrap my brain around it, about the concepts, about some of the concepts, but it's very interesting, actually.
That's exactly why I would like to trigger people to think about this even in depth.
Yeah, because I mean, I've had discussions about how teams can go wrong, how relationships can go wrong, how businesses can go wrong, and yeah, that people really, really often lose sight of their common goal. But as it is custom, I do really need to give the last question back to Michael, despite not having said anything much.
Okay, so last question. Iron Man or Batman?
That's a tough one, man. Iron Man or Batman?
Yes.
I will probably have to say Batman.
Ooh, why
Thanks.
is that?
Batman, first and foremost, I love the fact that when you think about it, he's actually really humble in his private life, but once he wears that suit, he has this air of confidence which borders on arrogance, and he also invests a lot. Well, actually, both of them invest a lot in technology, and both of them are striving also for to help the weak. But for some reason, I gravitate towards. Sorry?
Iron Man isn't humble, no.
Not in the direct sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I gravitate towards Batman more than Iron Man for some bizarre reason, even though I see them both almost equal. But I think what I also like about Batman is that the fact that he's got style. He's got style. He has swag. He's a smooth talker, even though both of them are smooth talkers. Yes. Okay. Let me keep it short. Batman. Yes, it's just a matter of preference.
Absolutely. So that's why we don't. Dear Rita, thank you so much for visiting us and explaining stuff to us, and thanks for always being there for me asking the awkward questions.
Do you know what? Katharina, Michael, thank you so much for being you, for inviting me to talk about this, and I hope your listeners have some takeaway.
And first and foremost, to approach Rita, and do not be afraid.
Don't be afraid. I do not bite.
Definitely approach her.
She's.
I just.
There was nothing
thought about
appropriate
finishing the question.
he could think of. No.
I
See,
only met you in with the barbecue from Katharina's birthday party, and then my mind drifted away to barbecue.
And then he got hungry and he forgot what he wanted to say.
Yeah, that was exactly the problem. I'm deeply sorry.
A nicer version would be that you learned from Ritas talk. Danke, dass ihr beim Nerds of Law Podcast zugehört habt. Auf unserer Webseite nerdsoflaw.com könnt ihr das Impressum, Datenschutzinformationen und viele spannendere Dinge finden. Dieser Podcast ist durch eine Creative Commons by Non-Commercial 4.0 International License geschützt. Das bedeutet, ihr dürft den Podcast kopieren, mit Freunden teilen, mit der Information, wo der Podcast herkommt, und ihn nicht für kommerzielle Zwecke verwenden. Das Urheberrecht für die Musik liegt bei Mick Bourday. Ihr findet seine Webseite unter mickbourday.com. Live long and prosper. Eure Nerds of Law.